He thought he had everything, until the phone rang with the news that would change his life forever. A true story of love, loss, and an unexpected rebirth. If you like stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post daily. Continuing. The December sun painted the crystal-clear waters of the St. Ives coast golden as Raphael Blackwood adjusted the knot of his Italian tie for the third time. At 38, the businessman had transformed his family inheritance into an empire of luxury resorts stretching from Brighton to Whitby. Rich, sophisticated, and dangerously solitary, he watched the activity at the boutique inn, where the wedding of two close friends, renowned architects he had known since university, was about to take place. The sea breeze carried the scent of jasmine and salt, mixed with the distant sound of guitars and the murmur of guests arriving that morning. Raphael sighed deeply, adjusting the cuffs of his white linen shirt. Events like that always took him back to the past, especially because he knew she would be there. Helen, his ex-wife, from whom he had divorced 2 years prior in a turbulent separation that still hurt like an open wound. At the time, Raphael had claimed he felt suffocated, that he needed freedom to expand his business internationally. Harsh words were spoken, resentments were sown, and a 7-year marriage crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. Now, walking through the soft sand towards the altar set up near the colorful cliffs, he wondered if he hadn't made the biggest mistake of his life. The scenery was breathtaking. White chairs arranged in a semicircle, a carpet of white rose petals leading to the bamboo altar decorated with orchids and tropical foliage. The bride and groom, Marcella and Leo, had chosen sunset for the ceremony, but the celebration had begun that morning with brunch on the inn's main balcony, offering a panoramic view of the turquoise sea. Raphael greeted acquaintances, laughed at the usual jokes, but his green eyes discreetly scanned each arrival. Helen had studied architecture with the bride and groom, so it was almost certain she would come. His heart raced, just thinking about seeing her again, even knowing she probably hated him. After all, he was the one who had destroyed everything. It was then that he saw her. The world stopped. Helen walked across the sand towards the inn, and Raphael felt as if an invisible fist squeezed his chest. She was stunning in a navy blue dress that highlighted her wavy brown hair, loose on her shoulders, her skin golden from the sun of the British coast. But it wasn't just her beauty that paralyzed him. She was carrying 3 babies, triplets. Raphael blinked several times, thinking he was dreaming or that the tropical heat was making him delirious. But no. Helen approached with 3 children of about 1 year old in her arms and in a double stroller that she pushed with one hand. The children were small, plump, with dark hair and some green eyes just like his. The cocktail glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the sand. The sound of breaking glass made some guests look in his direction, but Raphael couldn't move. He felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. The warm air seemed to have turned to concrete in his lungs. Helen finally saw him. For an instant, their eyes met across the space separating them, and Raphael read in her expression the same surprise, quickly followed by something that looked like pain. She hesitated, clearly wondering if she should turn back, but it was too late. Other guests had spotted her and were rushing towards her to greet her and meet the children. "My goodness, Helen, what a wonderful surprise!" Marcella, the bride, arrived first, radiant in her boho lace dress. "And these beauties are—" "They're my children," Helen replied with a forced smile, her voice slightly trembling. "Gabriel, Sophia, and Michael. Triplets." Raphael approached as if in a trance. Each step in the soft sand seemed to weigh a ton. The children were unmistakably his. They had his nose, his eyes, even the small dimple on their chin that he had inherited from his Italian grandfather. "Helen," he managed to say when he got close enough, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. She stared at him coldly, hugging the baby she held in her right arm tighter. "Raphael, I need to talk to you in private. I don't think that's a good idea. Helen, please." He looked at the children, who watched him with childish curiosity. One of them, the girl who must have been Sophia, stretched her chubby little hand towards him, making his heart almost explode. "Please," he repeated softer. Marcella, sensing the tension in the air, offered to stay with the children for a few minutes. Helen hesitated but eventually agreed. They passed the 3 babies into the eager arms of the bride and her family, who melted at such cuteness. Raphael and Helen walked in silence to a more secluded area of the inn, a balcony overlooking the sea where there were no other guests. The sound of waves crashed against the rocks below, and seagulls cried in the distance. "How long?" was the first thing Raphael asked, his hands trembling. "A year and 3 months," Helen replied without looking at him, leaning on the wooden railing. "They're mine." It wasn't a question. It was a statement loaded with certainty and pain. "They're my children," she corrected, finally turning to face him. There were tears in her eyes, but also a coldness he had never seen before. "Gabriel Davies, Sophia Davies, Michael Davies, Davies, Raphael, my surname." The pain that shot through his chest was physical, as if she had thrust a blade between his ribs. "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" Helen let out a bitter laugh. "I tried." "That's not true. I never—" "Never what, Raphael? Never said you didn't want responsibilities, that you didn't want children, that marriage was a prison." She wiped away a tear that had escaped. "I remember every word you said in that law office." Raphael ran his hands through his hair, despair taking over him. It was true. He had said those things in a panic attack at 36, thinking he was losing his youth, his freedom. What an idiot he had been. "But that was before. If I had known you were pregnant—" "I discovered the pregnancy 3 weeks after signing the divorce papers." Helen was now openly crying, years of hurt spilling out. 3 weeks, Raphael. I went to the doctor because I was feeling strange, nauseous. It was triplets, 3 babies. Can you imagine hearing that alone?" He tried to approach, but she recoiled. "I tried to call you dozens of times. Your secretary always said you were busy, that you didn't want to talk to me, that you had left clear instructions not to accept my calls. I went to your office in Kensington 3 times. Each time that viper Camilla blocked me at reception." Camilla? His secretary? Raphael felt a sudden nausea remembering the countless times the woman had commented that Helen had called, always adding that she seemed desperate and that it was better for him not to answer so as not to give false hope. He always agreed, thinking he was being kind, avoiding hurting his ex-wife even more. "Helen, I didn't know. Camilla never told me you came to the office." Liar. She turned back to the sea, the breeze messing up her hair. "The 3rd time I went, I managed to go up to your floor. I saw you through the glass wall of the meeting room." Raphael frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "You were with a woman, blonde, elegant. She was sitting at the meeting table and you were leaning between her legs, both laughing." Helen closed her eyes, as if the image still hurt. "I got the message. You had already moved on." Raphael's heart stopped. He knew exactly what scene Helen was talking about. Brigitte, the French architect who was designing his resort in Whitby. They were reviewing blueprints when she dropped a pencil. Raphael had bent down to pick it up, just as Camilla entered with coffee, making a joke about the situation. That was all it was. But from Helen's perspective, "It wasn't what you think," he said desperately. "That was Brigitte Dubois, my French partner. She dropped a pencil and I was picking it up. That's all it was, Helen. I would never—" "Whatever." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "What I saw was enough to understand that you had moved on, that you really didn't want anything to do with me anymore." "I never moved on." The words came out before he could think. "I never could. These 2 years have been hell, Helen. I worked like crazy to try and forget the biggest mistake of my life." She looked at him with surprise, but the coldness soon returned. "Too late, Raphael. Too late for everything." They stood in silence for a few minutes, only the sound of the sea and the wind filling the space between them. Down below at the party they could hear laughter and music, life going on as normal while their world imploded once more. "How did you manage? Alone with 3 babies?" Helen sighed wearily. "At first it was a nightmare. High-risk pregnancy, premature birth. They stayed in the neonatal ICU for 2 months. I practically lived at the hospital." She paused as if deciding whether to continue. My mother helped me as much as she could, but it wasn't easy. 3 babies crying, waking up in the middle of the night, diapers, bottles. Raphael felt a deep pain imagining Helen going through all that alone, while he wasted time and money on businesses that, he now realized, meant nothing. Where do you live? In London. I bought an apartment in Notting Hill, with my share from the sale of our old apartment. Our apartment. The home they had built together in Belgravia overlooking Hyde Park, where they had spent the best years of their lives. Raphael remembered every detail: the kitchen where Helen loved to experiment with cooking on weekends, the balcony where they had breakfast, the bathtub where they took long baths together, discussing plans for the future. Helen, Mummy, a high-pitched voice cut through the air. They turned to see one of the babies, the boy, squirming in Marcella's arms and reaching out to Helen. Mummy! Helen ran towards her son, and Raphael followed. When they reached where the guests were, the 3 children seemed agitated, clearly wanting to return to their mother's arms. They're beautiful, Helen, Marcella said, passing Gabriel to her. And those faces, they look so much like... The bride stopped speaking when she noticed Raphael standing nearby, the realization hitting her like a lightning bolt. The surrounding guests also began to notice the undeniable resemblance between the businessman and the 3 children. They're your children, Leo, the groom said softly to Raphael. It wasn't a question. Raphael nodded, unable to speak. One of the babies, Sophia, again stretched her little hand towards him, and this time Helen didn't stop her. With his heart in his throat, he touched his daughter's tiny fingers. She gripped his index finger and smiled, a gummy smile that completely melted his defenses. "Hi, Princess," he whispered, his voice choked. Helen watched the scene in silence, her own heart breaking at seeing the father meet his daughter for the first time. As much as she hated him for the abandonment, she couldn't deny that she had always dreamed of this moment. "Please," Raphael said, looking at her, his green eyes shining with unshed tears. "Give me a chance to get to know them, to be a part of their lives." Helen held Michael tighter against her chest, clearly torn between the desire to protect her children and the wish to give them the father they had always wanted. "It's not that simple, Raphael." "Why not?" It was then that a male voice answered for her. "Because she's with me now." Everyone turned to see a man approaching across the sand. Tall, dark-haired, with greying temples and an elegant bearing, he walked with the confidence of someone who knows his own worth. He wore a light beige suit that perfectly matched the beach setting, and his brown eyes fixed on Raphael with a mix of curiosity and protection. Helen closed her eyes for a moment, as if knowing the situation was about to get even more complicated. "Raphael Blackwood," she said with a tired voice. "This is Edward Mason, my fiancé." The word hit Raphael like a shot. Fiancé. Helen was going to marry again. With another man. A man who, by the way the children greeted him with smiles, was a constant presence in their lives. Edward approached Helen and kissed her forehead tenderly, then tickled Gabriel's tummy, who laughed heartily. It was obvious there was intimacy there, a familiarity built over time. "A family. Nice to meet you, Raphael," Edward said, extending his hand to greet him. "Helen has told me a lot about you." Raphael shook the man's hand automatically, but his mind was in a panic. Not only had he lost 2 years of his children's lives, but now he discovered that another man occupied the place that should be his. As a father, as a husband. "Edward is a businessman in London," Helen explained, as if she felt she owed some justification. He helped us a lot. With the children, with everything. And he's going to adopt them after. "The wedding," Edward added with a gentle smile, but Raphael got the message. "We want to give them a stable home, a complete family." Raphael's world collapsed once again. Not only had he lost Helen and his children, now he was losing the right to be their father to another man. A man who, from what he could see, was everything he hadn't been: present, responsible, reliable. The party music continued in the background. Guests chatted and laughed, But to Raphael, the noise seemed to come from very far away. His entire life had changed in a matter of minutes, and he had no idea how to deal with this new reality. Sophia was still holding his finger, and he noticed she was trying to bring his hand to her mouth. Such a natural, innocent gesture from a daughter who had no idea who he was, but who instinctively accepted him. I need some time to process all this," he managed to say, gently releasing his daughter's finger. "Raphael," Helen began, but he was already walking away. "If you'll excuse me," he said politely to Edward, then looked once more at the children and at Helen. "Congratulations on the family you've managed to build." And he walked away before anyone could see the tears starting to stream down his face. He sat on a fallen palm tree trunk on the beach, away from the party, looking at the sea that had always been his refuge. But this time, not even the blue immensity could calm the storm brewing within him. He had children, 3 beautiful children who didn't know him, and he was about to lose them forever to a man better than he had ever been. The sea breeze brought the distant sound of children's laughter, and Raphael closed his eyes, etching that sound into his heart. Perhaps it was the only thing he would be able to take from that day. Raphael remained on the beach until the stars began to appear in the St. Ives sky. The party had moved to the inn's main hall, and he could hear the music and laughter coming from the wedding reception. But there, sitting on the still warm sand of the day, he could only think of the devastating revelations of the past few hours. 3 children, Helen engaged to another man, 2 years lost because of lies and misunderstandings. When he finally gathered the courage to return to the party, he found a completely transformed atmosphere. Fairy lights were lit everywhere, creating a magical ambience. Guests danced on the floor set up on the main balcony, while others chatted in small groups scattered throughout the inn. Raphael scanned the hall with his eyes, looking for Helen and the children. He found them in a more secluded corner, where she was feeding Sophia a bottle while Gabriel and Michael played in a makeshift playpen someone had set up. Edward was crouched beside the boys, making faces that made them laugh heartily. The scene was both beautiful and painful. This was how it should have been. It was he who should have been there, making his children laugh, helping Helen with the bottle, living those small moments that make up a family. Tough, isn't it? Raphael turned to find Leo, the groom, standing beside him with 2 beers in hand. He offered one to him, which he gratefully accepted. "Congratulations on the wedding," Raphael said, trying to steer the conversation away from the obvious. "Thanks, but that's not what you want to talk about, is it?" Leo took a sip of beer, watching Raphael carefully. "Have you known the triplets long?" "A few hours," Raphael replied bitterly. "And you? How long have you known the situation?" "Since they were born. Helen and Marcella have been best friends since university. We followed the entire pregnancy, the complicated birth, the difficult first months." Leo paused. "We also knew her desperation when she tried to contact you." Raphael felt his stomach churn. "She talked about that?" "Helen is a private person, but when she was 6 months pregnant, hospitalized with preeclampsia, she broke down. Marcella spent the night with her at the hospital, and she told her everything. How she tried to find you, how your secretary always dismissed her, how she was humiliated at your office." "I didn't know." Raphael ran a hand through his hair, desperate. "Camilla always told me Helen had called, but that it was better for me not to answer so as not to give false hope. I thought I was being kind." "Kind?" Leo looked at him with an expression that mixed disbelief and compassion. "Man, your ex-wife was pregnant with triplets, and you thought not answering her calls was kindness?" The question hit Raphael like a punch. Put that way, his attitude seemed even more cruel and insensitive. "I was feeling lost at the time of the divorce. I thought I needed to distance myself completely to be able to move on." "And did you?" Raphael looked once more in Helen's direction, who was now quietly talking to Edward, while the 3 babies slept in their laps. "No, I never could. These 2 years have been the worst of my life." "Then why didn't you try for a reconciliation?" "Pride, I guess. Fear of rejection. And also," Raphael hesitated, "Camilla always discouraged any attempt I made to contact Helen. She said she was fine, that she had moved on, that it was better if I did the same. Leo nodded slowly. Was your secretary in love with you? The question caught Raphael by surprise, but as he thought about it, the pieces began to fall into place. Camilla always offered to work late, always found excuses to travel with him on business trips, always made subtle comments about how Helen wasn't the right woman for a man like him. I think so, he admitted, but I never showed interest. She didn't need to. For a woman in love, sometimes hope is enough. Leo took another sip of beer. And if she saw an opportunity to keep you away from your ex-wife? Raphael felt nauseous. Camilla had deliberately sabotaged any possibility of communication between him and Helen. And he, blinded by his own pride and confusion, had allowed it. I need to fix this, he murmured. It might be too late. Edward is a good guy, rich, stable, present, everything Helen needed when she was raising 3 babies alone. Do you know him well? I met him through Helen about 8 months ago, a tech. Businessman, widower, no children. He lost his wife in a car accident 5 years ago and never remarried until he met Helen. Leo looked directly at Raphael. He truly loves her, and he loves the children as if they were his own. Every word was like a blade. Raphael realized he wasn't just competing against another man, but against 2 years of presence, care, and unconditional love. How did they meet? Helen was at a park with the triplets alone. It was one of those tough days every single mother knows, all 3 children crying at once, she exhausted, not knowing what to do. Edward was jogging in the park, saw the situation, and offered help. He said he had experience with children because he took care of his nephews and nieces. Raphael imagined the scene, Helen desperate, vulnerable, and Edward appearing like a knight in shining armor. Exactly the opposite of what he had been, a coward who had fled responsibility. They connected instantly. Edward started showing up at the park on weekends, then it became a tradition. He brought snacks for the children, helped Helen with the double stroller, and played with them while she rested. A bit. Sounds like a saint, Raphael commented bitterly. He's not a saint. He's a man who recognized a second chance at happiness and grabbed it with both hands. Leo finished his beer. The question is, what are you going to do with yours? Before Raphael could answer, a commotion caught their attention. Gabriel had woken up and was crying, waking the other 2 babies as well. Helen and Edward tried to calm them, but it seemed to be one of those moments when all the children decide to have a tantrum at the same time. Instinctively, Raphael approached. Can I help? Helen looked at him with surprise, but Edward replied first. Thanks, but we're used to it. It's just a matter of organization. Gabriel's hungry, Helen said, taking a bottle from her bag. Edward, can you stay with Sophia while I feed him? Of course, love. The word love hit Raphael like a slap. Edward called Helen love with the naturalness of someone who had the right to do so. Raphael watched the coordinated dance between them. Edward held Sophia and made her stop crying by making funny faces, while Helen fed Gabriel his bottle. Michael, who continued whimpering, naturally went into her arms as soon as Gabriel finished feeding. It was a rehearsed routine, perfected by daily practice. A real family. You're a great team, Raphael commented, trying to sound casual, but his voice came out tense. Helen looked at him over Michael's head. We had to learn to be. Helen, Edward said softly, why don't you take advantage of the children having calmed down to talk to Raphael? I'll stay here with them. It was a generous suggestion that caught everyone by surprise. Helen hesitated, clearly torn. I don't think that... Go, love. You have important things to talk about. Edward kissed her forehead. I'll take care of them. Helen passed Michael into her fiancé's arms and looked at Raphael with resignation. All right, but make it quick. They moved away again to the more secluded balcony where they had talked that morning. The party continued lively in the background, but there it was possible to have privacy. Edward seems like a good man, Raphael began. He's the best man I've ever known, Helen replied without hesitation. Patient, caring, present, everything a father should be. Helen, about our conversation this morning, I need you to understand that I never knew you tried to contact me. Raphael, that changes nothing now. It changes everything." He turned to her, his eyes shining with emotion. "If I had known about the pregnancy, I would never have let you go through that alone. But you didn't know, and I went through it." Helen crossed her arms in a defensive posture. "Do you know what it was like? Discovering I was pregnant with triplets 3 weeks after our divorce, alone at a doctor's appointment, hearing the doctor talk about the risks, about the possibility of having to be on complete bed rest for months?" Raphael swallowed hard, imagining the despair she must have felt. "I called you that same day. I was in a panic. I needed to tell you. I needed your help." Helen wiped away a tear that had escaped. Camilla answered and was extremely cold. "She said you were in a very important meeting, that you couldn't be interrupted." "Helen, I tried to explain that it was urgent, that it was about something that would change your life. She said you had left clear instructions not to accept my calls, that it was better for me to seek legal counsel. If it was about a divorce matter." With each word, Raphael felt his anger towards Camilla grow. How dared she intercept such an important call? How had he been so blind? In the following days, I called more times. Camilla always had an excuse. "You were traveling, you were in meetings, you were busy with a new acquisition." Helen laughed bitterly. On the 5th attempt, she was more direct. She said you had expressly asked not to receive my calls, that you were trying to move on, and that it was better for me to do the same. "I never said that." Raphael approached her, desperate for her to believe him. "I never asked her not to accept your calls. But you also never looked for me." The accusation was true, and it hurt. Raphael lowered his head, ashamed. "I was confused, regretful, but too ashamed to admit it. And Camilla—" He paused, remembering other situations. "Camilla always made comments about how well you looked when you appeared in the society columns, how beautiful you were, how quickly you seemed to have moved on. She discouraged me from contacting you, saying it would be selfish of me to disrupt your new life." "What new life? I was pregnant, nauseous, scared. I didn't know that." Raphael ran his hands over his face. "Camilla filtered all the information that reached me about you. Now I understand she did it purposefully." Helen was silent for a moment, processing this revelation. "And when I went to your office?" "You went to my office?" Raphael frowned. "When?" "3 times. The first time when I was 4 months pregnant. My belly was already showing, Raphael. Camilla blocked me at reception, said you were in an international video conference that would last hours." Raphael tried to remember. 4 months after the divorce. He really had been in many video conferences due to international expansion. "The second time I was 6 months pregnant. Huge belly, clearly pregnant with multiples. Camilla didn't even let me go up, said you had traveled to France for an emergency meeting." France. Raphael vaguely remembered commenting to Camilla about a possible trip to see Brigitte's project, but ended up resolving everything via video conference. "And the third time?" Helen closed her eyes as if the memory still hurt. "It was my last attempt. I was 8 months pregnant, huge, uncomfortable, but determined to tell the truth. I managed to go up because Camilla was in the bathroom. I reached the corridor on your floor and saw you in the meeting room through the glass wall." Raphael remembered the meeting with Brigitte about the final details of the resort in Whitby. "I saw you with that blonde woman. She was sitting at the table, you between her legs, both laughing." Helen opened her eyes, and Raphael saw all the pain she had carried for 2 years. "I understood that you had really moved on, that you truly didn't want anything more to do with me." "Helen, it wasn't what you think," Raphael despaired. "That was Brigitte, my French partner. She had dropped a pencil. I bent down to pick it up, and she made a joke about the situation. That's all." "How was I supposed to know?" Helen shouted, then lowered her voice, remembering the party. "How was I supposed to know? To me, my ex-husband was with another woman while I was carrying 3 of his children in my belly." Raphael wanted to approach, to comfort her, but knew he had no right. "I left that day determined to raise our children alone. I never looked for you again." They remained silent for a few minutes, the weight of all the misunderstandings hanging between them like a ghost. "And when did Edward appear in your life?" When the boys were 8 months old, I was exhausted, depressed, trying to juggle freelance work with 3 babies. It was on a particularly difficult day at the park. Helen smiled for the first time in the conversation. He appeared like an angel. Raphael felt jealousy burning in his chest, but forced himself to listen. It was a Sunday morning. I had gone out with the children because I was going crazy indoors. But at the park it was worse. Gabriel and Sophia started crying at the same time. Michael pooped, and I only had 2 diapers in my bag. Helen chuckled softly. I was sitting on a bench crying with them when Edward appeared. What did he do? He asked if I needed help. I said yes, desperate. He picked up Gabriel and started singing a nursery rhyme that made the baby stop crying instantly. Then he picked up Sophia too and managed to calm both of them while I took care of Michael. Raphael imagined the scene and felt a painful pang of envy and regret. It should have been him in that park. We talked for hours. He told me about the wife he had lost, about how he wanted to have children but never could. I talked about you, about how lost I felt raising 3 babies alone. You talked about me. I talked about their father, that he had disappeared when he found out we were going to have children. Helen looked at him directly. I lied, Raphael. I said you had abandoned me pregnant because you didn't want responsibilities. It was easier than explaining the truth. That I abandoned you without even knowing you were pregnant. That you abandoned me, period. The result was the same. Raphael couldn't argue with that. Regardless of the misunderstandings with Camilla, he had ended the marriage. He had said cruel things about not wanting responsibilities. Helen had simply filled in the blanks in the worst possible way. Edward started showing up every weekend. He brought snacks, helped with the children, gave me a few hours of rest. He never asked for anything in return, never tried to rush me into anything romantic. And when did you? 4 months ago. He took me to dinner for the first time, said he was in love and that he wanted to be officially part of my life and the children's lives. Helen sighed. He said he wanted to give me security, stability, a real family. And you said yes. I said I needed to think. I liked him a lot, was grateful for everything he had done, but... She hesitated. But I wasn't in love. Helen looked at him with deep sadness. I was still in love with you. Raphael's heart stopped. Helen, 2 months later, I accepted the proposal anyway. I thought love would come with time, that it was more important to give my children a present father than to wait for a love that had abandoned me. Raphael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Helen still loved him, but had chosen another man because he had abandoned her. And now? He asked, his voice hoarse. Do you still feel that way? Helen looked him in the eyes for a long moment. I can't feel that way anymore, Raphael. I have 3 children to think about. I have a good man who loves me and wants to give us a stable life. I can't live on fantasies about a man who hurt me so much anymore. But if you knew the truth about everything, if you knew Camilla lied, that I never wanted to abandon you, would it change anything? You still ended our marriage because you felt suffocated. You still said you didn't want children. You still left me, Raphael. It was true. Even though Camilla had sabotaged communication afterwards, the divorce had been his idea. I was an idiot, he admitted, an immature idiot who didn't know what he was losing. And now you know? Now I know I lost everything that mattered. My family, my future. The only woman I ever truly loved. Helen closed her eyes as if the words physically hurt. It's too late, Raphael. It can't be. I'm going to marry Edward in 3 months. He's going to adopt the children. We're going to form a family. A family that should be ours. But it's not, Helen shouted again, then took a deep breath to calm down. It's not, Raphael. This family is mine and Edward's. You had your chance and you wasted it. Raphael felt tears burning his eyes. He was losing everything once again, and this time it might be definitive. Give me a chance to at least know my children. It doesn't have to be anything between us, but they are my children. Helen studied him for a long moment. Edward won't like it. Edward will have to understand that no matter how wonderful a man he is, he's not their biological father. Biologically, perhaps not, but in everything that matters, he's more their father than you are. The truth was cruel but undeniable. Edward had been present for every important moment in the children's lives, while Raphael didn't even know they existed. Let me try, please. Let me try to be the father I should have been from the start. Helen sighed wearily. Raphael, 1 month. Give me 1 month to get to know my children. If after that you still want to go ahead with the wedding, I'll accept it. But give me this chance. Helen looked towards the hall, where Edward was playing with the 3 children on his lap, all laughing and having fun. I'll think about what's best for them. That's all I can ask for. They walked back to the party in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Raphael knew he had planted a seed of doubt in Helen's mind, but he also knew he was competing against 2 years of presence and care. When they reached where Edward was with the children, the man smiled at Helen with such love that Raphael felt a new wave of jealousy. "How was the conversation?" Edward asked, passing Sophia into her arms. "Enlightening," Helen replied, avoiding looking at Raphael. Edward looked between the two, clearly sensing the tension. "I imagine it was." The rest of the night passed in a blur for Raphael. He watched from afar the family that should have been his, trying to etch into his memory every smile, every gesture, every moment he had lost. When he finally said goodbye, in the early hours, Gabriel had fallen asleep again in his arms. For a few precious minutes Raphael held his son, feeling the warm weight of the small body, the sweet baby smell, the rhythmic breathing against his chest. "Daddy will fight to be in your life," he whispered into the child's ear. "Daddy won't give up." As he returned Gabriel, to Helen their fingers briefly touched, and for a moment both remembered how they used to be, how they still could be. "Good night, Raphael," Helen said softly. "Good night. And Helen, thank you for letting me meet them today." Edward shook Raphael's hand in a polite but cold farewell. "It was a pleasure to meet you. I hope everything works out for the best for everyone, especially for the children." Raphael nodded, understanding the message. The fight would be clean, but it would be a fight. As he walked across the sand towards his room at the inn, Raphael made a decision. No matter what it cost, he was going to win back his family. He was going to prove he deserved a second chance. The war for the family he had lost was just beginning. 3 weeks passed since that afternoon in the park, and Raphael Blackwood's routine had completely changed. He woke at 6 in the morning not to review financial reports, but to be at Helen's apartment at 7:30, helping with the triplets' breakfast and taking them to daycare. He rushed lunch between meetings to make it in time to pick them up at 5, spent afternoons playing at the park or their apartment, and only returned home after the 3 children were asleep. It was exhausting. It was chaotic. It was the most rewarding thing he had ever done in his life. Helen had been cautious at first, supervising every movement, every word, as if expecting him to give up at any moment. But as the days passed and Raphael continued to show up religiously, she began to relax. They still hadn't talked about a reconciliation, but the initial coldness had given way to something resembling friendship. "Gabriel took his first steps today," Helen announced when he arrived on that rainy weekday. Raphael felt his heart clench. "Seriously? I missed it?" "It was just 3 little steps from the table to the sofa. I'm sure he'll repeat the performance for Daddy." Daddy. It was the first time Helen had used that word to refer to him, and Raphael felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Where's the champ?" he asked, taking off his wet jacket. "In the living room, playing with blocks. But Raphael—" Helen hesitated. "I need to tell you something." Her tone of voice immediately alerted him. "What is it?" "Edward came here yesterday." Raphael tensed. In the 3 weeks since the conversation at the park, Edward had completely disappeared from their lives. Helen had explained that he was giving her space to think, but Raphael knew that the sudden absence of the only father the children knew was confusing for them. What did he want? He wanted to see the children, and he wanted to know if I had made a decision. "And what did you say?" Helen stared at him directly. "I said I'm still watching to see if you'll keep showing up after the novelty wears off." The answer hurt, but Raphael understood. "And him?" "He said that regardless of our situation, He would like to continue being a part of the children's lives in some way, that it's not fair for them to lose two paternal figures because of adult problems. Raphael considered this. As much as jealousy burned in his chest, Edward was right. The children had become attached to him during crucial months of development. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's generous of him, and it would be good for them." "Then I agree." Helen seemed surprised by the ease of his answer. "You agree? If he wants to be Uncle Edward in their lives, I won't stop him. He's been more of a father to them than I have so far." "Raphael." "It's true, Helen. As much as it hurts to admit. It's true." Raphael sighed. "By the way, I need to tell you something too. Something big." "What?" "I'm selling the company." Helen blinked several times, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "What do you mean, selling the company?" "I'm selling Blackwood Resorts, everything. The resorts, the stakes, the properties, everything." "Raphael, are you crazy? That company is your life." "No, Helen, you are my life. The company is just money." Helen sat down heavily on a kitchen chair, clearly shocked. "But why? You worked for years to build that. And I worked so hard that I lost what really mattered." Raphael knelt in front of her. "These days, taking care of the children made me realize something. I can't be the father they deserve if I'm traveling all the time, closing deals, managing resorts scattered across the British coast. You can just slow down. Delegate more. It's not enough. I want to be present when Gabriel takes his first steps, when Sophia says her first words, when Michael overcomes his shyness. I want to be at every doctor's appointment, every birthday party, every school play." Helen looked at him as if seeing a stranger. "And what will you do? How will you support yourself?" "I've already talked to some investors. The offer I received will leave me financially comfortable for the rest of my life, even maintaining a high standard. But more importantly, I'll have freedom." Raphael took her hands. "I can open a small consultancy here in London, work with sustainable tourism, something that has always interested me. Or I can invest in smaller projects closer to home." "Raphael, this is crazy. You can't make a decision like that on impulse." "It's not impulse. It's the first rational decision I've made in years." The sound of crying coming from the living room interrupted the conversation. Gabriel had stumbled trying to reach a toy and was inconsolable. Raphael went to him, picked him up, and began to sing that Italian song he had discovered calmed the three children. "Shh, champ. Daddy's here, it's all right." Gabriel snuggled into Raphael's chest and within minutes was laughing again, trying to pull his father's hair. "Are you sure about this?" Helen asked when Raphael returned to the kitchen with Gabriel in his arms. "Absolutely. Helen, I spent 2 years trying to fill a void with work and money. It didn't work. Nothing will work if you're not with me." Helen was silent for a long moment, watching Raphael play with Gabriel. It was impossible to deny that he had changed. The man she had known was ambitious, always eyeing the next deal, the next million. This man was willing to give up everything for a few daily hours with his children. "And what? If I say I need more time, that I'm not ready to come back yet, then I'll wait. I'll keep showing up every day, taking care of them, proving I deserve a second chance." Raphael looked her in the eyes. "But Helen, I'm not giving up. Never again." That night, after Raphael left, Helen stayed in the living room looking at the photos scattered on the coffee table. Photos of the triplets with Edward in their first months, more recent photos with Raphael. 2 different families, 2 different men, 2 possible versions of the future. The phone rang. It was Edward. "Hi, Helen, how are you?" "Confused," she replied honestly. "Raphael told me today that he's selling the company." Silence on the other end of the line. "Edward, did you hear?" "I heard. Did he really say that?" "He did, so he can be present in the children's lives every day." "Wow." Edward took a deep breath. "That changes things." "How does it change things?" "Helen, when we broke up, I told you that you deserved to be with who you truly loved. But a part of me hoped Raphael would prove to be the same immature man as before, that you would realize you had made a mistake and come back to me." Helen felt tears pricking her eyes. "Edward, But a man who gives up an empire to be a father, that's not the same man who left you 2 years ago. It's not, she quietly agreed. Do you still love him? I never stopped loving him. And are you afraid he'll abandon you again? I am. Helen, look, I won't pretend it doesn't hurt to know you're going to be with him, but I need to tell you something. In these months we spent together, I saw how you looked at his photos you'd forgotten in the drawer. I saw how you lit up when someone said his name. I tried to make you love me like you loved him, but I always knew I was fighting a losing battle. Helen cried silently. What I'm trying to say is, if he really has changed, if he's willing to give up everything to be with you, maybe you should give him a chance. For you and for the children. And you? I'll be fine. Maybe not now, but I will be. And I want to continue being a part of the children's lives if you allow it. They've become important to me too. Edward, you are an incredible man. Any woman would be lucky to have you. Thank you. But the woman I want is still in love with her children's father. And that's okay. After hanging up, Helen stayed awake late, thinking. Raphael had changed, that was undeniable. But would the change be permanent? Would he not regret giving up everything when the reality of daily fatherhood became routine? The next morning, Raphael arrived earlier than usual, carrying coffee and fresh pastries from the French bakery Helen adored. What's this for? She asked, but gratefully accepted the coffee. To celebrate. Celebrate what? Last night I finalized the sale of the company. Helen almost dropped her coffee. Already? But you only told me yesterday. I'd been negotiating for 2 weeks. Yesterday was just the signing of the preliminary papers. Raphael smiled. As of Monday, I'm officially a former businessman. Raphael, are you sure about this? Is it irreversible? I have regret clauses for another 48 hours if that's what you're asking. Helen stared at him. And what if I tell you I don't want to come back? That, all this sacrifice was in vain. Raphael didn't hesitate for a second. It wasn't in vain. Even if you never forgive me, even if we never get back together as a couple, I want to be the father these children deserve. And I can't be that father if my head is in business all the time. At that moment, Helen knew. She knew he had truly changed. The Raphael she had married 7 years ago would never give up his ambition for another person. But this man, this dedicated father, who showed up religiously every day, who sang to calm, his children who changed diapers without complaining, this was a new man. Raphael, she said softly. Yes? Kiss me. He looked at her surprised. Helen, please, kiss me. Raphael approached slowly, as if afraid she would change her mind. When their lips finally met, it was as if the 2 years of separation vanished. It was the same kiss as always, but charged with a new maturity, of forgiveness, of a second chance. When they separated, both were crying. I love you, she whispered. I never stopped loving you. I love you too, and I love our children, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve you. You already have. They kissed again, and this time it was Gabriel who interrupted them, appearing in the kitchen walking alone, with stumbling but determined steps. Look who's walking, Helen shouted, and Raphael bent down to receive his son in his arms. Come here, champ, Daddy's so proud of you. Gabriel laughed loudly when Raphael lifted him into the air, and the sound brought Sophia and Michael running from the living room wanting to join the fun. In minutes the kitchen was filled with childish laughter and the joyful shouts of the parents. Helen watched Raphael on the floor playing with the 3 children and felt her heart filling with a happiness she hadn't experienced in years. Her phone rang. It was Edward. Hi, she answered, still smiling. By the tone of your voice, I imagine you've made a decision. I have. I hope you're very happy, Helen. Truly. Edward. Do you want to come have dinner with us tonight? The children miss you. Are you sure? Helen looked at Raphael, who nodded vigorously while tickling Michael. We are sure. You are part of their family too. Then, I accept, but I'm warning you, I'm bringing a date. A date? Helen smiled. That fast? It's a friend I met at a bookstore last week. Nothing serious yet, but who knows? I'm looking forward to meeting her." After hanging up, Helen sat on the floor with Raphael and the children. For the first time in 2 years, she felt she was in the right place, with the right people. "What is it?" Raphael asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Nothing, just happiness." He smiled and pulled her in for a kiss, while 3 pairs of curious green eyes watched them, with childish curiosity. "Now only one thing is missing," Raphael murmured against her lips. "What?" "You moving in with me, or me moving in here. It doesn't matter where, but I want to wake up every day seeing you." Helen laughed. "Your apartment is bigger." "So that's it. We're moving." "Calm down, Raphael. Let's take it slow, 1 step at a time." "How many steps do you need?" Helen pretended to think. "About 3 or 4. Like Gabriel today." Exactly like Gabriel today. They laughed together, and Raphael knew he would take as many steps as necessary, small or large, fast or slow, because at the end of the line was his family, and that was worth any journey. 2 years later, Raphael and Helen's home in Chelsea was in complete turmoil. It was Saturday morning, and the triplets, now 3.5 years old, had decided that the living room would be the perfect setting for a theatrical performance involving superhero costumes, an impressive number of cushions, and music at maximum volume. "Daddy, look what I can do!" Gabriel shouted from the sofa, preparing for a jump that Helen immediately intercepted. "No, my love, remember the rule? Feet on the ground in the living room." "But I'm Super Gabriel." "And Super Gabriel can fly in the garden where there's grass to cushion the landing," Raphael intervened, appearing in the living room with Sophia on his shoulders and Michael clinging to his leg. "Daddy's too slow," Sophia commented from her privileged position. Michael was faster. "It's because Michael is small and light. Daddy's getting old." Raphael feigned a dramatic groan, making the 3 children laugh. Helen watched the scene from the kitchen doorway, one hand unconsciously caressing her still discreet belly. 4 months pregnant, and only Raphael knew. Today would be the day to tell the children they would have a baby brother or sister. The life they had built together was everything Helen had always dreamed of, but never dared to hope for. After the sale of Blackwood Resorts, Raphael had invested in an ecotourism company focused on sustainability, something he was passionate about, and that allowed him to work mostly from home, with occasional trips around the county of London. Helen had resumed her career as an architect, specializing in social housing projects, a job that deeply fulfilled her. "Good morning, family." Edward appeared at the back door, carrying a fruit basket and accompanied by Marianne, the librarian he had been dating for 8 months and whom the children adored. "Uncle Ed!" The 3 darted towards him, who received them with open arms. Edward had become a constant and beloved presence in their lives. Every weekend he came for lunch, took the children for outings, participated in birthday parties. He was officially the favorite uncle, and Raphael had learned to see his presence as a gift, not a threat. "How's my favorite niece?" Edward asked, tickling Sophia. "I'm your only niece," she replied between giggles. "And these are my favorite nephews, too." "We're your only nephews." Raphael and Helen exchanged an amused look. That joke had been repeated every weekend for 2 years. "Marianne brought new books for you," Edward announced, and Marianne opened her bag, revealing 3 different storybooks. "Can I read now?" Gabriel asked. He had developed an early passion for reading that surprised everyone. "After lunch, love," Helen said. "Now it's time to tidy up the toys and get ready to eat." The morning continued in the chaotic but joyful routine they had created. Raphael prepared pancakes, his weekend specialty, while Helen and Marianne set the table. Edward entertained the children with spontaneously invented stories about fantastic adventures. During lunch, Helen noticed Raphael looking at her with anxiety. They had agreed to tell about the pregnancy after dessert, but he was clearly nervous about the children's reaction. "Daddy's weird," Michael observed, always the most perceptive of the 3. "Why am I weird, champ?" "You're looking at Mummy a lot and smiling to yourself." Raphael laughed. "It's because Mummy is beautiful today." "Mummy is beautiful every day," Sophia declared with the seriousness of an expert. "It's true," Raphael agreed, winking at Helen. After dessert, when the children were satisfied and calmer, Helen took a deep breath. "Children, Daddy and Mummy have some news to tell you." 3 pairs of green eyes turned to them with curiosity. "What kind of news?" Gabriel asked suspiciously. In his experience, adult news wasn't always good. "Very good news," Raphael assured. "News that will change our family." "Are we moving?" Sophia asked worriedly. "I like this house." "We're not moving," Helen laughed. "The news is that in a few months you're going to have a baby brother or sister." Total silence. Michael was the first to process it. "What do you mean?" "Mummy's pregnant," Raphael gently explained. "There's a baby growing in her tummy." "A baby?" Sophia shouted, jumping from her chair. "Really?" "Really," Helen confirmed, touching her belly. Gabriel frowned, clearly processing this complex information. "But there are already 3 of us. Why do we need another one?" "Because a family can grow," Helen explained, "and because this baby will be lucky to have 3 older siblings to protect and teach important things." "I can teach him to read," Gabriel got excited. "I'm going to teach her to dance." Sophia started jumping around the kitchen. "And I'm going to teach, Michael thought seriously. "I'm going to teach him to be cool like Uncle Ed." Edward, who had watched everything in silence, was visibly moved. "Thank you, Michael. That's the biggest compliment I've ever received." "Is it a boy or a girl?" Gabriel wanted to know. "We don't know yet," Raphael replied. "We'll find out together in the coming weeks." "I want a sister," Sophia decided. "There are already too many boys in this house." "I want a brother," Gabriel countered, "to make a football team." "And you, Michael?" Helen asked. Michael shrugged. "Whatever. I'll like them just the same." The simplicity of the answer made all the adults laugh and get emotional at the same time. The rest of the afternoon was a celebration. The children asked thousands of questions about babies, about pregnancy, about what it would be like when their baby sibling was born. Edward and Marianne offered to help with whatever was needed, and Raphael could barely stop smiling. That night, after the guests left and the children were asleep, Raphael and Helen settled on the back porch, watching the garden they had planted together. "Are you happy?" Helen asked, snuggled into his arm. "Happier than I imagined possible," Raphael replied, kissing the top of her head. "And you?" "Scared," she admitted. 3 children are already crazy. 4. We'll manage. We always have." "Yeah, we always have." Helen smiled, remembering how they got there. "Raphael?" "Yes?" "Do you regret it? Selling the company, changing your whole life?" Raphael took a moment to answer, not because he had doubts, but because he wanted to choose the right words. "You know what I used to do before when things got difficult? I traveled, closed another deal, bought another property, buried myself in. Work until the difficulty passed." He paused. "Last week, when Gabriel broke his arm at the park, my first instinct was to panic. But then I realized I was exactly where I was supposed to be. At the hospital, holding my son, comforting you, solving the problem together." Helen remembered that day. Gabriel had fallen off the slide and fractured his wrist. Raphael had remained calm throughout the process, from the rush to the emergency room to the sleepless night caring for the boy. In the past, I would have missed that. I would have been in a meeting on a trip, anywhere but where my family needed me. Raphael hugged her tighter. "So no, I don't regret it. Not for a second." "Even with less money?" Raphael laughed. "Helen, you know we're still much richer than most people, right?" "I know. But it's not the same as having an empire. You're right, it's not the same, it's better." He looked at the window of the children's room, where a nightlight cast soft shadows. "Do you know what it's like to have Gabriel call you Daddy for the first time? Or Sophia saying you're the best father in the world? Or Michael sleeping in your lap when he's having a nightmare?" Helen smiled. "I know. It's the best feeling in the world. That's real wealth. That's real success." They sat in silence for a few minutes, just enjoying the tranquility of the London night. "And about Edward?" Raphael asked. "Are you happy he's part of our life?" "Very happy. The children adore him. He's an amazing uncle. And Marianne is sweet." I thought it would be harder for me to accept. Why? Jealousy, insecurity. But he loves the children in such a pure, disinterested way. It's impossible not to admire. That. Helen turned to look at him. You've changed a lot, you know. For the better, I hope. Much for the better. The man I married was incredible, but immature. This man here, she touched his face, this man here is my hero. Raphael kissed her softly. And this woman here is the love of my life. Even pregnant and swollen? Especially pregnant. You look even more beautiful carrying my children. Our children. Our children, he corrected, smiling. 6 months later, Helen gave birth to a girl, Eleanor Blackwood, who arrived in the world crying indignantly and instantly won everyone's hearts. The triplets took turns helping to care for their sister, each taking on their role with adorable seriousness. Gabriel, now 4, read stories to Eleanor every night. Sophia sang to her and insisted on choosing her outfits. Michael, always the protector, wouldn't let anyone hold his sister without first checking if their hands were clean. Edward fell in love with the girl as much as with the other 3, and Marianne, who had moved to London to be near him, officially became the children's favourite aunt after Helen. On a December night, 2 years after Eleanor's birth, Raphael and Helen were on the same balcony where they had talked about the pregnancy. The children slept, the house was at peace, and they enjoyed a rare moment of silence. "Have you ever thought about having more children?" Raphael suddenly asked. Helen laughed loudly. "Raphael Blackwood, have you gone mad? Aren't 4 children enough?" "They're enough, more than enough." He laughed too. "I was just checking if you thought the same thing." "I do. Definitely do." She paused. "But if I don't think further ahead?" "Yes?" "Who knows?" Raphael looked at her surprised. "Seriously? Maybe, in a few years. If we can survive the next 2 years without going crazy. Helen Davies Blackwood, you surprise me every day. I love you every day." They kissed under the starry London sky, surrounded by the comforting silence of a sleeping family, by a life built with love, patience, and second chances. Raphael thought about the conversation he had had with the lawyer the previous week when they finalized the official adoption of the triplets. They were now officially Blackwood, carried his surname, had his name on their birth certificates as father, but more important than any paper, they carried his love, his daily presence, his absolute dedication. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "Why?" "For forgiving me a second chance, for building this family with me. Thank you for transforming into the man I always knew you could be, even when I didn't believe, especially when you didn't believe." Inside the house, Eleanor began to cry. Without hesitation, the two rose together to care for their daughter, just as they did with everything, as a team, as a family, as 2 people who chose to build something bigger than themselves. As Raphael rocked Eleanor back to sleep and Helen settled the other 3 in their beds, both knew they had found something no money could buy, the true wealth of a family united by love. Outside, the city of London continued its frantic pace, but inside that house in Chelsea, time followed the rhythm of hearts beating in harmony, of a family that had found itself after being lost, and of a love that had matured until it became unbreakable. Years later, when Raphael was asked if he regretted trading an empire for a family, he would always answer the same thing. I didn't trade an empire for a family. I traded a small dream for a big dream. And it was the best decision I ever made. And when Helen looked back at all the difficult moments, all the pain of separation, all the fear of a second chance, she knew that every tear had been worth it. Because sometimes to find true love, you first have to get completely lost. And sometimes the greatest proof of love is not to never leave, but to have the courage to come back and transform into the person the other deserves. Under the starry sky of Chelsea, the Blackwood family slept in peace, knowing that the true happy ending was not the absence of problems, but the presence of enough love to face any storm. Together. Always together.